pleasure to meet all at last, and here we are with some more films I should have talked about years ago. And well, yeah, if you hadn't noticed from yesterday's episode, then well, you would have noticed that this is pretty much there. But anyways, today let's go ahead and talk about yet another big reboot. This is one that I definitely could have at least touched up on some time ago. Robocop 2014. This film, of course, has a lot of potential as a reboot, as Robocop was in fact one of the best known in the entire franchise that has in fact taken quite a big staple since the late 80s. And Robocop, of course, became quite a big cyborg to remember. Other than the Terminator, other than Bishop from Aliens, other than many other big examples that came around throughout the 70s and 80s, as well as the early to mid 90s that pretty much gave us quite a big trend on cyborgs and androids. And that, of course, is what led to a lot of big phenomenons in recent years, like Detroit Become Human, as a good example. But Robocop was certainly not like any other cyborg we had seen. Robocop, of course, was not necessarily a robot, more machine than human. This is, in fact, the fabrication of Officer Alex Murphy in the city of Detroit, Michigan, who had gone out on mission and eventually got shot down by a ruthless gang led by Clarence Boddicker, whom, of course, was played by Kurtwood Smith. And it is worth noting that in terms of the reboot, well, we have something completely different. We have actor Joel Kinnaman, who plays Alex Murphy, but instead of getting shot down by a gang, we have a gang conspiracy in which a bomb is planted inside of a car. And when Murphy goes over to open it up, then boom! It explodes, killing Murphy in the blast. Well, the blast, of course, would have resulted in death if it weren't for the company Omni Consumer Products stepping in and saving Murphy's life with the help of a large robotic outfit. A large body that is in fact capable of doing a whole lot more than you might expect. At least for a reboot, it does play up the build-up that leads to the point where Murphy's supposed death would take place. But then, of course, it's found that Murphy was in fact still alive, even after the blast had taken place. I certainly do like how the cast, which also includes Gary Oldman, Michael Keaton, as well as some appearances by Samuel L. Jackson, pretty much take place. But I also do have to say that some of the other appearances that take place from other varying actors are also pretty much there for the showing. And I also will say that the plot line at least does what it does best. When it comes to reboots, there's usually a lot of expectations that take place. And many of us would actually agree that it would be absolutely terrible of an idea to try and remake a film. Because of course they can be different from the original. And Robocop 2014 pretty much does a couple of things differently in comparison to the original. Like I said before though, the car bombing pretty much takes place instead of the gang shootout, which of course would have caused Officer Murphy's death, and eventually would have led to Murphy's resurrection in the form of a large, high cyborg. But in the end, this film pretty much does what it does best. It gives us an incredible sense of modern day action and modern day warfare that can in fact take place between two different sides. Because we do see Murphy a good amount of Robocop stylish black suits taking place, whereas of course the original suit was of course in line with the original color scheme from the original film. Nice and silvery, with some black accents. And it is still worth noting that we are in fact seeing a lot of other things take place. There of course is actually a cameo of the Wizard of Oz soundtrack, which shows If I Had a Heart playing in the background for some reason. I guess it's supposed to be some sort of way to set the tone in the scene where Murphy is apparently training in a large facility meant to exercise Murphy's reflexes and other abilities while in this new cyborg form. So, I can't really be sure if this is supposed to be as good as the original or even better than the original, but maybe that's just me pointing out the fact that I somehow have a liking to this reboot. And maybe it's the fact that I kind of do. Because, well, Joel Kinnaman, Gary Oldman, Michael Keaton, Samuel L. Jackson, how can anybody not know those names? How can anybody not be familiar with the big careers that each of these people have led? And now they all come together in 2014, just like that? Well, I feel like that I'm pretty much just cutting a lot of slack because of these kinds of actors all over the place. Maybe that's just what we're looking for, pretty much. We're looking for familiar names. Names that gather attention. Names that can grab people's eyes and ears all around. And maybe that's just one factor out there. Another pretty big highlight would be the intense action that takes place. Similar, in fact, to the original. Although I can't say that this new Robocop happens to get as good of a body count as the original. Because the original had a gigantic shootout in a cocaine factory. Dozens of people were shot on sight by Murphy at that time. But in the new version, we do get some similar things taking place, but there's not as much death taking place. It's a little more bent on interrogation. Much like how there is a big difference between both Batman continuities, both old and new, pretty much. The older versions basically show Adam West fighting off the crooks, but not necessarily killing them, and being kind of gentle in a way towards them when interrogating them in a way. And then, of course, we got Christian Bale, who is absolutely ruthless with the villains of the Gotham City gang. So, I guess there's always just a big difference between the old and new that takes place. So, in a way, I will say that the new does, in fact, deliver a different high note on that perspective. So, in the end, though, we do see Alex Murphy eventually face off against the mastermind who was responsible for what was supposedly the death that should have taken place with that car bombing. And that, of course, was Michael Keaton. And Robocop does, in fact, put up a good fight. So, in the end, though, the OCP is pretty much defeated. And Murphy gets to live a happy life with the rest of the family. Once and for all. Unlike the original. So, it honestly just does seem to me that there are a lot of things that probably could have been done as a way to enhance the film itself and a lot of its other things. So in the end, when I want to give this thing a score, I probably won't go very high on it. Perhaps, at most, a 7.2 out of 10. Not necessarily being very high with it, but also not being low with it. I almost like this reboot in comparison to the original Big Three. The original trilogy that was in fact the original Robocop, with Peter Weller at the hands of the original character. Pretty much. Aside from what happened in the third film, of course. So, you know what? That'll pretty much cut it for today. And I will in fact have more things going alongside this one though. So, today is going to be a pretty big chock full of different things to talk about here on films I should have talked about years ago. So do prepare yourself for that. But if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.